Hello, 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 and welcome back to my channel. Happy Saturday, October 1st. I decided to hop on here for a few minutes, not too long, and make a very informal video about the trending topic of the Jeffrey Dahmer case. Now we know this is trending because Netflix decided to make a series about what happened. And I know that this is a very triggering series for many of the victims, people that maybe lived in the building with Jeffrey Dahmer at the time and were exposed to these events, family members of the victims, even people that lived in that city at the time, or just nationwide, people that remember when this happened. It was very traumatizing. I remember when this happened. You know, I'm from Gen X, so Generation X. I have been around a while, and I was there, not there, but around when this happened, and it was just mind-boggling that something this heinous would happen. But you know, unfortunately, things like this do happen. They might not happen on such a large scale because people get caught. It's funny because after the series came out, I saw a few things pop up in the news, similar cases where there was only one victim involved or whatnot, but just recent, I mean, things like this happen. They're very disturbed people in our society. So what I do like to do, I do like to watch like true crime documentaries or follow different cases that happen and so forth, and try to understand what happened in the mind of this person that drove them to do XYZ, whatever that was. And in this case, Jeffrey Dahmer is pretty fascinating. I mean, not in a good way, but I'm not saying that. Just a pretty fascinating case. First of all, I want to give my heartfelt sympathies to everyone affected by this case before I continue talking about this. And if this is a trigger, don't watch this video. Like, it's cool. You don't have to keep scrolling. I wouldn't encourage anyone that gets triggered by this topic to endure a video they don't want to watch. Now, what I want to talk about is, have you heard that saying, that old saying, nature loads the gun, but nurture pulls the trigger? So think about it. Nature loads the gun, nurture pulls the trigger. Well, I want to talk about a third aspect in this particular case, and that's spiritual. Again, I'm going to issue the disclaimer. I am a Christian. So this is going to kind of come from a Christian lens, what I'm about to say today. Not just a psychological analysis, scientific view of what's going on, but a Christian lens. And I think there's a third aspect to what happened in this case, and that's spiritual. I'm seeing a very spiritual influence on his actions. Okay, so let's start off with talking about the very beginning. Okay, so when Jeffrey Dahmer's mother was pregnant, she took a lot of psychological drugs. She had issues. We don't know exactly what she was diagnosed with. I don't know how good they were at diagnosing people back then, and how accurate, they were at diagnosing psychological disorders. From what I understand, she's very histrionic, like wanting to be the center of attention, always thinking she has some kind of health issue. Very depressed, suicidal, and she was taking a lot of drugs while she was pregnant, which do have an impact on the fetus. What that impact was, that we don't know, but that can fall into an environmental factor or something that could have changed him in the womb. So starting that young, right, or at that stage. When this baby was born, she could have suffered from postpartum depression. I believe that's one of the things that was wrong with her. And she didn't want anything to do with the baby. She didn't hold the baby, and she didn't bond with the baby. So he suffered neglect. So that would have resulted in an attachment disorder. I'm not going to diagnose him. I'm not a psychiatrist or not qualified to diagnose him. Just sharing my opinion about the different things that impacted his development. So, when you have a baby and you don't give that nurture that the baby requires, and you don't bond with that baby at such a fragile stage, you will impact that child for life. I mean, you're hardwiring that child's attachment. So I feel like he had some type of attachment disorder, and being that he did. He had some core wounds. We know he had an extreme fear of abandonment. But being that she was not nurturing, and then the father wasn't around because he was working all the time. He wasn't there because he was working, like many of us do. I worked while my kids were little. I mean, it's just part of life. Nobody was going to pay our bills, and so he was the person that paid the bills in the family. Please excuse this fly that's flying around my head. He's been flying around my house for a good 2 weeks, and I just can't get him, and I'm trying not to let him distract me right now. The same fly is. Okay. So anyway, did not bond with his mother. Okay. So then as he got a little bit older, elementary school age, there were rumors of neglect. I mean, those rumors came from somewhere, obviously, right? There was also a hernia surgery at 4, which his father claimed had some kind of, or thinks had some kind of impact on him. Like maybe when he had the surgery, there was some kind of lack of oxygen to the brain, or maybe an interaction with the anesthesia or something. The hernia was in his scrotum, I believe. So some kind of pain trigger, maybe. I mean, who knows? At the age of 4, that's quite an ordeal to go through. So that could have some kind of environmental play into all of this. But like I said, nature loads the gun, nurture pulls the trigger. So there had to be something underlying in his nature, in his genetics, and then all these environmental factors piled on, pulled the trigger, right? So that brings me to my next point. The father, now this was highlighted in the series, admitted to having unnatural thoughts, of starting fires when he was younger. And that is actually one of the 3, and I can't remember the technical term, but one of the 3 signs of being a serial killer. I think it's harm to animals, fire, like starting a fire, and there's bedwetting. I don't know if he was a bedwetter or not, but so his dad had the secret fantasies of starting fires. Jeffrey Dahmer had the harm to animals, and I don't know if the bedwetting thing was part of any of that, but his father had that, and he never acted on it though. So, but he was feeling guilt for maybe having something wrong with his wiring that got passed down to Jeffrey. Clearly his mother had some mental situations going on, disorders going on, and we don't know exactly what they were, but those genetics do get passed down randomly. It doesn't mean that if one of your parents has a mental disorder, you're going to get the mental disorder. It doesn't mean that. Genetics are so weird. It's like you take a bowl of M&Ms. Like, I'm a parent. I have the bowl of M&Ms is all of my genetic factors. And one of my kids comes and takes a scoop of M&Ms, and that makes his or her genetic makeup. Well, he doesn't get all of my M&Ms. He just gets the scoop. And they're random. So let's say I have a mental disorder. That mental disorder might not be passed on to my child. And then you know, my other child might come and get a scoop of M&Ms and they might get the M&M that has the genetic mental disorder component. That could explain why his brother, he had a younger brother, didn't have the same problems that Jeffrey Dahmer did. But the other explanation to that too is his younger brother was not neglected like Jeffrey was. Jeffrey was the oldest. So see, there's so many different components and you can't even compare them, even though they're full-blooded brothers. They have different factors going on. So fascinating. Anyway, he had an extreme fear of abandonment. That would have stemmed from the mother not bonding with him as a child, in my opinion. Okay. And that led him to an extreme of wanting to kill people to keep them in his possession and be in total control of them when they wanted to leave. And then it led him to another extreme of wanting to consume them because he felt like it made them part of him. So he felt like it made that person part of himself when he consumed a part of them. Of course, there had to be some kind of underlying mental disorder to make you have these irrational, delusional thoughts. But the another fascinating thing about this is he's been diagnosed with so many different mental disorders. I mean, I've been reading on all the different mental disorders he's been diagnosed with, but nobody could really agree on what he had. I think by the time he was in prison, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, but he didn't really neatly fit into any box. Clearly, he has something. I mean, I've seen autistic, borderline, some form of schizotypal. I can't even keep up with all of the things he's been diagnosed with, but then another expert would come along and say, no, it's not that. And then he took a test for a psychopath and did not meet the criteria for a full-blown psychopath. He didn't score high enough. So it's like he didn't fit neatly into any box, which is what makes this so fascinating. Now, of course, he fit neatly into the necrophilia box because clearly he liked to have relations with corpses. That's a clear-cut diagnosis there. So I'm not saying that they didn't know everything that was wrong with him, but there was some things they just couldn't pinpoint, I guess is what I'm trying to say. What I want to talk about is, okay, there were molestation allegations that were never really confirmed. So if you look at the series, there was someone on a talk show this is on the Netflix series, saying that his father was accused of molesting him. And of course the father was like, oh, I never molested him. But then when you go online and research, all of the original documentation from the case, you'll see that it was reported early on that he was molested at a young age by someone else, like a neighbor boy or neighbor or something like that, when he was like 8, or I can't remember exactly the details, but he was supposedly molested. And during his formative years, but Jeffrey Dahmer denied it. He would deny it. Now, this is an interesting thing that comes to my mind, is that's around the time that he had that strange obsession with the dead animals, and I don't know, I don't remember if we've talked about that on this channel or if any of you have researched love maps, but love maps are generally formed by the age of 8. And that's going to basically, it's kind of sets in stone who you're going to be attracted to or who the ideal partner is for you by the time you're 8 years old. You already know that. It's like your wiring is already programmed. And so think of all the things that happen in your life before you're 8 years old that makes you decide what an ideal partner is, whatever that is. Well, some people have their love maps vandalized, so it gets messed up. In this case, I think to myself, I wonder if there's some truth to the molestation accusations, because that would have been around the time his love maps were forming. And that's around the time that he had this fascination with the dead animals. And did something get, the wiring get crossed and something get, severely miswired around that time when it comes to his sexuality and his fascination with dead animals and death and things of that nature, and of course intertwined with his extreme fear of abandonment. You see how complicated, and how when the layers come in on this case, how complicated it gets. I have a few notes over here because I didn't want to forget anything, and I'll probably still forget something, but please forgive me as I take my time going through this. Another interesting thing is when he was when he had that interview with Stone Phillips while he was in prison, so this was after he was captured, if you look at his body language, there was an interview with him, his father was to his right, and then Stone Phillips was across from them. You could see throughout this video, if you watch body language, go watch that video and watch his body language, he drifts further and further. By the end of the interview, he's virtually out over here and his father's here. So what is the distancing body language between him and his father? What is that all about? So it makes you wonder, what does his father have to do with all this? Now, he comes across as this nurturing, caring, great guy, that doesn't know what went wrong, but you gotta wonder, like, he had to have seen some red flags when he was younger. There's no way. I mean, he just had to have. He's a scientist. He had to have seen some red flags. And if with the whole molestation thing, I feel like something's being swept under the rug there. Now, if his father and his mother fought a lot, which is from what I understand they did, was he controlling? Was he abusive? I mean, these things we don't know really, right? So was he narcissistic? So what kind of environment did he really grow up in? If he was like that, if he was controlling, that would explain why Jeffrey Dahmer wanted so bad to be in control as an adult. Like, that is one of his driving forces for being a serial killer and wanting to have interactions with these corpses. That was having the ultimate control, because the people were dead and he could do whatever he wanted with them. And he said it. That's why he did what he did. He wanted to be in control. Well, that generally comes from being not in control when you're younger. And then another thing that was interesting is how his father, or how he was always like, this has nothing to do with my family. Nobody made me like this. I take full responsibility. That's very commendable. But okay, what if his father was narcissistic and always placed blame on him? Or his mother was narcissistic. I don't know. I mean, we don't know everything that happened in that house. And he's used to shouldering the blame. Now, he is fully responsible for this. I'm not saying he's not. But he was adamant, I am fully responsible for this. You are, but there are things that happen in your genetics, and there's things that happen as a child, and there's other influences throughout your lifetime that do can cause you to have whacked out behavior. It doesn't mean if you have something in your genetics, it doesn't mean that if you had a bad childhood, you're going to be a serial killer. No, it does not. That is just that could be one of the results. Nothing's absolute. I mean, it has to be like this perfect recipe for a monster. So that was interesting, the distancing language. It's like it was telling a different story than what was coming out of his mouth. That part was telling a different story. Like he just couldn't get far enough away from his father during that interview. So I thought that was very interesting. You could also tell with his body language, with some motions he was doing with his mouth, that he was holding something back in that interview. He was being very forthcoming with a lot of information, but there was moments that I'm not telling it all. I'm holding something back. So if you catch that interview again, watch for those signs. So as a teenager, he was going through school. He developed an alcoholism problem. And so one of the kind of narcissistic things he would do, which he was accused of being a narcissist, but I wouldn't even say he was a full-blown narcissist because he doesn't really neatly fit in that category either, although he had some narcissistic tendencies. But he obviously thought he was above the law, which is very narcissistic. And one thing he would do is bring beer to school or hard liquor to school and drink at school. He would drink alcohol. Now that was true. That was featured on the Netflix documentary, but I believe in real life he would like have it in his bag, or a little bit more concealed, but he was bringing alcohol to school and getting drunk, getting lit all day long. Okay, so that was his coping mechanism to cope with whatever storm was brewing in his mind. Now, this is interesting, okay, because let me take a sip of water real quick, excuse me. This is interesting. He wasn't really a great student. But the funny thing is he wasn't dumb. He got tested. I read somewhere along the line that he actually had a really high IQ. But he was just not interested in school, clearly, because when he graduated, he just kind of barely got by, but he did graduate. But then when he went to college, he spent his first semester in college not really taking it serious, not really there for college, and had a 0.45 GPA. I've never even seen a GPA that low. So clearly he didn't make it in college. One interesting thing, now this is what brings me to the spiritual aspect of this case. There was one girl he went to high school with that said she was invited to a party at his house, and she said there was like 8 people there. And while she was at his house, he had a seance. A seance. So remember I said nature loads the gun, nurture pulls the trigger, and then there's a third possible aspect to this trifecta of monster creation, and that's spiritual. So he had a seance. Okay. What was he trying? Who was he trying to connect with in this seance? She said, Satan. Like, seriously? You're trying to talk to Satan in a seance at a party at your house? I mean, I would have been ran out the door, ran down the street. That's odd. Satan? Like, you're not trying to... Now, I don't agree with any kind of seance at all, but personally. But you're trying to contact Satan? That's a red flag. That's a red flag. Okay. So we had that. Now it's funny because in the series, not the movie, when Tracy Edwards was in his apartment and got away, they showed a glimpse of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible sitting on the table. Now I don't know if that's real or not, or if that's just something they added to the movie. But that's what triggered me into digging deeper into the satanic side of this, or the demonic side of this, because why would they put that in there? And there was more to the story there, right? So think about that. Tracy Edwards, if you watch his testimony, he said when they were watching Exorcist, which of course was Dahmer's favorite movie, and that's what got him to go into this trance and got him channeling, I'm guessing, the demon or what have you, to do the heinous acts he was doing. He said he was watching The Exorcist, and when certain parts of The Exorcist would come on, he'd like go into a trance and start chanting like in tongues, like a demonic tongue. He said he didn't know what he was saying. It was like, it sounded like a chant though. Like a mumbling chant. He couldn't interpret what he was saying. And he said another thing was, he said the bone structure in his face changed. To me, I'm sorry, but this sounds like real demonic possession to me. To me. I mean, y'all can think what you want, but this is my opinion. I think there's definitely a spiritual aspect to this, okay? Then, when Dahmer was giving his interview, back to the Stone Phillips interview, I think it was Stone Phillips, or it might have been another interview he did, but he kept referring to his compulsion. He was also diagnosed with compulsive disorder, another one of his diagnoses. He was referring to this compulsion as it. So the way he kept referring to this thing as it made me do this, it made me do that, it was like it was a separate entity. It wasn't like I had this compulsion to do this. It was like it made me do. I can't explain it. It made me do that. To me, I really honestly feel like he was describing demonic possession. Now I say possession, later on it said, well, not that it said, he said, he changed his outlook, he changed his worldview, from evolution to creation theory, because he said when he believed in evolution, this is when he was in prison doing his interviews, I want to say it was an interview with Stone Phillips. When he believed in evolution, he said it cheapened life because he thought that everyone came from the slime. So what is the big deal? It's like killing a bug. You know, it's like killing an animal and killing a human. What's the difference? We all came from the slime. We came from dirt. We came from nothing. And when we die, we're going to return to nothing. So he said, when his father sent him this creation science material and he got to really studying it and learning there was a creator, which I do believe in. I believe that we were created. That he was able to put a value on life and understand the true magnitude of what he did. I know it's hard for us normal thinking people to even understand this. But again, I like to try to understand things. I really like to try to understand things from their perspective, okay? So in his own words, he was saying that evolution cheapened life, cheapened the value of life. So to him, it wasn't really a big deal. But now that he believes in creation and that there is a God and we do have a creator, that it changed his mind about things. So then it led him to the point where he ended up getting baptized and became a Christian before he was killed in jail, which he kind of knew that was his fate. Obviously had a lot of enemies, a lot of people wanting, you know, to see him die for what he did, you know. But he did get baptized before he died, and he was asked, you know, do you still struggle with the same thoughts? He was like, you know, yeah, I still have the same thoughts. But he felt changed. This is going to be hard for a lot of people to get. But when you are not a Christian, okay, and you are connecting with the devil in seances and whatnot, and having direct communication. And you know, who even knows what else he was doing? These are just things that came out along the way. You're giving demonic entities legal grounds to you. You are giving permission to be used as a vessel by demonic entities. So then when he made the step to say, oh, I don't believe that anymore. I don't want that anymore. I want to be made new. I want to be baptized. That took the legal grounds away from the demons. And that doesn't mean that he cannot be oppressed by different thoughts and things like that, you know. So he would have the, you know, possibly fleeting thoughts and things like that. He had, and I'm a believer in mental illnesses, and I'm a believer in nurture pulling the trigger. I'm a believer that things that happen to us as a child can wire us the wrong way, you know, as an adult, and impact the way we, you know, act and think and the things we do. It's really scary, actually. One thing I want to say before I end this is really take parenting serious. Give those babies, when we have the chance, all the love and nurturing that you can. Doesn't mean we can completely avoid things. Like if a child is born with, you know, the wrong DNA or something, but we don't want to add to this recipe. We don't want to make things worse. We don't want, maybe they are born with a predisposition to XYZ, but maybe we can change the trajectory with nurture, spiritual, you know, teach them the right way. I honestly, personally do not think that worshiping Satan is the right way at all, but get them on the right spiritual path, you know, and get those things started at a young age. So even if they are born with the wrong cards in nature dealt those wrong M&Ms out, we can kind of get ahead of it. Also, learn the red flags. Don't turn a blind eye. If you see some things in your child that don't look right, intervene at a young age. Don't let it go on like it did here. This got completely out of control. So anyway, I mean, those are just the things I wanted to talk about. There's so much more to unpack with this situation, but I just wanted to more talk about the nature, the nurture, and the spiritual aspects of this case. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, list them below. And sorry, you know, I like to make my videos like we're having a chat at lunch or coffee, and they're not really formal, and not giving you like pretty graphics or anything like that. So I apologize about that. It's kind of like we're just friends having a talk. So, sorry I didn't have any like pictures or anything extra to go along with this like so many YouTubers do. I like to keep my videos real casual. This case is just really mostly leaving me speechless, and just kind of left me like, wow, this is a lot of twists and turns to this. And what he did, there's no excuse for it. I mean, I'm not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it's tragic, it's traumatizing, it's horrific, the things that he did. But I'm just trying to understand, like, what would drive a person to go that far, to do these things. And that's what this whole video is about. So, until next time, which is going to be soon, it'll be about something else, not this. But I just wanted to hop in and share my thoughts on this because it's just so crazy. So anyway, share your thoughts. Talk to you later. Bye.